During PAX this weekend, we had a panel with the lead UI designer, Eorzea, who is very adorable, as it was his first trip outside of Japan. If you don't know who this man is, he's basically responsible for most of our interface in the game. And while I'm not going to talk about everything said in the panel, but I will be linking PAX's official recording of it, as there was some really sweet interaction between the panelists. I want to speak about a few notable things they did talk about. During the panel, they actually brought some really interesting statistics. So one of the things they wanted to work on when making the game was they wanted to capture both their classic player base of Final Fantasy XIV, but also the traditional MMO player. And they used World of Warcraft at the time as their kind of inspiration or understanding of what the regular MMO player like. So there were two things they especially mentioned that really mattered. It was the ability to play the game with both keyboard and mouse and the gamepad, as the MMO players tend to play with keyboard and mouse, as that is the standard in most MMOs, while those who have played Final Fantasy are more familiar with the gamepad. So while it was complicated, they did manage to give us a game that allows you to use both control schemes. And I genuinely think this is one of the biggest strengths of Final Fantasy XIV, as it has allowed the game to be on PC, on PlayStation, and now on Xbox. It opens up the game to a large and varied player base, and they are all catered to really well. Now, I am personally a keyboard and mouse player, as that is simply what I have found most comfortable, and maybe it's no surprise as I do come from World of Warcraft and, well, a lifetime of PC gaming. But they did bring in some statistics we haven't seen before, which shows how the keyboard and mouse versus the gamepad lays out across the regions, with it being really neat that the West and Japan are quite different. But I'm curious, what are you playing on? Do you play on the classical keyboard and mouse, or do you use the gamepad? Or do you switch between them? And talking about control schemes, they also talked about the standard versus legacy control scheme. Now, I was a little bit confused because I've never really thought about this. But there are basically two optional control schemes in the game. When you start the game, you are automatically put in the standard control scheme, which is what I am currently in. But the legacy control scheme is more common in JRPGs, and is really interesting to see that it's like most of the players in Japan prefer the legacy control scheme. Now, I had to go into the game and check what I use, because I have the habit of holding down my right mouse button, which kind of locks the camera behind my character, and I control them like that. So I had genuinely never thought about which control scheme I was using. But we also got to know about some upcoming updates, which are very exciting. First of all, there are two things being worked on for the gpose. First is a fissure casting pose. It is currently in testing, and they are hoping it's gonna arrive in 7.1. This is really good because I've been wanting to catch like a pose of my fissure actually fishing. So this is gonna be very neat. The second feature is the portrait screenshot. They are working on making this work somehow. It's probably not coming anytime soon, but they are testing it out, so we might get it before the end of Dawn Trail, which would be very fun. Then we have a feature I am so excited for, and that is the chat bubbles. They are working on them. I assume we will have the option of having these chat bubbles like show up or not. We can probably decide on how they will be, just like we can decide on if we see other players' names and such. But so far, they look really good, at least for short messages. We can see a longer message on the right side of the screen, and that one kind of cuts off. I'm guessing this is something they're working on. They did say they are still working on some hurdles that they have to overcome before they can start implementing this into the game. So there is no good idea of when this will release. But eventually, we should get some chat bubbles. And the final feature they showed was the whiteboard, which is the tactical map for fights. This is one of the Dawn Trail features that we're still waiting on, and they expect it to release at some point during one of the Dawn Trail patches. It's simply just not ready yet. But what are you excited for? I am really excited to see the chat bubbles because I think they're gonna be a really fun addition to the game. But I also expect them to be wholly optional, which I think is also a good thing, as Final Fantasy XIV has an incredibly flexible UI. And what do you play on? Keyboard and mouse or gamepad? And do you use the standard or the legacy control scheme? Tell me about it down in the comments. And while you're down there, maybe throw me a commendation by liking and subscribing. And in the end, all I want to say is takk fyrir að horfa og eigðu yndislegan dag.